Hello class, this is the lecture for week 4. Week 4 is probably the most important content of this entire course because it relates to project management and software development in modern organizations, including hospitals. You may be sitting there thinking, I want to be a manager. I don't want to be a programmer. I don't intend to be involved in project management of software projects. That's for people at Microsoft and Oracle and so forth. There's some truth to that, and I realize that you are not preparing to become a programmer or a software project manager. But as a general manager, and even as an end user in any organization, it is very likely that you will, from time to time, become involved in software development projects. The reason is because organizations frequently need software that they cannot go to the store and buy off the shelf. They have business processes that are unique to the organization, and they either have software developers employed by the organization who write applications for the organization, or they depend upon consulting organizations that write software to do it for them. And in either case, people in the organization, including managers and end users, need to know what's going on, because otherwise there's a very high probability that a lot of money will be spent creating software which possibly will not work at all, or more likely will work but will not be a good match for what the organization really needs. So if you don't believe me, take it on faith. This is important. This is important for managers to know something about. Because after all, you are going to be responsible for people who have the technical expertise to do these things. If you don't understand the nature of the task, how are you going to make good choices as to who to ask to be responsible for these things? And how are you going to understand what's going on when technical people begin throwing jargon at you? And if you're clueless, they're going to wind up making decisions that you should be making as a generalist manager. Now, this chapter talks both about project management and also about portfolio management. I'm more interested in project management, but for a moment let me say something about portfolio management. Just as a financial portfolio is a collection of assets, a IT portfolio is a managed collection of information technology resources. And the point is that some office needs to be responsible for keeping that portfolio in check, for knowing when to phase out old hardware and software, and when buying new things, understanding how it's going to work together with what you already have. There's a lot of things to keep into consideration. Not just the cost of new acquisitions, but what is more important is total cost of ownership. Now, let me go back to project management for a minute. There are two major methodologies: the waterfall methodology of software development, project management, and the iterative incremental approach. You can look at my speaking notes that are in writing for iterative incremental. Very briefly, waterfall is what's taught. It's what's easily understood, and it's what doesn't work very well anymore. Iterative incremental is not so easily explained, but is compatible with new programming methods called object-oriented programming, and is the approach that most good software project managers will use to manage modern projects. To place it very briefly, waterfall means we do one thing at a time, no going back, And if somebody asks for the system to do something else, but they make the request too late in the process, the answer is no, you should have told us that before. We can't do that now. That's a problem with waterfall. The other problem is, at least theoretically, you don't do any testing of the source code that programmers write under waterfall until all of the source code has been written. This is very risky and unnecessary using modern software tools. Very briefly, iterative incremental means that we can do several things at once so long as we have a project manager who knows what he or she is doing. We do not have to finish business analysis before we begin writing part of the code. We do not have to write all of the source code before we begin testing it. And this sounds a little outrageous, but we don't even have to complete the application before we begin to deploy it. You've heard of beta testing. That's the deployment of software that's not really quite all there yet. So, to kind of bring this together rather quickly, when you re-engineer a manual process in order to automate it, you do the re-engineering first, then you do the automation of it. You wouldn't put jet engines on a rowboat. If you wanted a faster mode of transportation, you would rethink the boat. Automation of business processes is very, very important. If it's well done, it'll serve the interests of the organization well. If it's not well done, you will sub-optimize parts of the organization at the expense of the whole. Please read my written notes. Please read the book and take advantage of the other materials that are made available here in Blackboard to you. Thank you.